Hello there everyone, I'm Christina at CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this triple braid wirework bracelet, and this is what mine looks like. So you can see we have here 3 individual braids. The middle one is a chunkier one and it's also very textured because we're actually weaving lengths to braid with, and then on either side we have these smaller braids. It's just individual base wires, but we're then adding beads on the outer edge on either side to give a nice bit of colour to it as well. Obviously you can really use whatever kinds of bead you want to really experiment with the look of it. But then even though it's 3 individual braids, it's one full complete piece that we have because the ends are all together like this. And I finished mine off using this obstacle clasp and extended chain, but obviously you can use whatever kind of clasp, just using these loops here when we finish off the ends of the actual bracelet. And this is then what mine looks like on here. So you can see we get the really nice effect of wearing 3 separate braided bracelets, but actually it's all one piece. So it's nice and comfortable. We don't have to worry about them being separate and kind of moving about so much. So you can really play around with what materials that you choose to use for this. So either a different color wire or use some different beads as well, just to achieve a different look, because it will look very different depending on what materials that you choose to use. But I would love to hear what you think of this down in the comments below, and also anything else that you have to say, because I love interacting with you. So if you want to learn how to make this bracelet, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to use. First of all, I have 2 different gauges of regular round copper wire. The first one is a 0.8mm. This is going to be the base wire. And then I have a 0.4mm. This is going to be the weaving wire. And then I have the beads I'm going to use. So these ones here are 3mm blue coated hematite gemstone rounds. So they're pretty small because I don't want too chunky beads on here. But you can really experiment with what kind of beads that you want to add in. And finally, we need a couple of jump rings to be able to attach our clasp, and that in my case here is the lobster claw clasp and extended chain. You can choose whatever kind of clasp that you prefer. Now check out the description box below the video if you need to have a closer look at the material list written out and any links as well. Otherwise, let's get the materials ready and let's get started. And then the lengths of wires that we'll need is 12 lengths here of about 40 centimeters each, and just make sure they're nice and straightened out so we don't have any kinks in them. So then the 0.4mm wire here that we're going to use as the weaving wire, I'm just leaving that on my reel because otherwise it's going to be a long length that we need, and it can be hard to know exactly how much we need anyway. So leaving that on the reel, and I'm just going to start working from the open end here. Now first of all, we need to start out by connecting all our base wires together, basically using this weaving wire here. So, and obviously also attach the weaving wire to the base wires. So I'm just going to take one base wire first of all to attach my weaving wire to. And I'm going to leave a short tail of the weaving wire behind that base wire there, just so I have that to hold on to. And I'm going to start a little bit in from the end of the base wire as well on one end here. I usually do about 7 centimeters or so. It's just really enough that we can use to finish it off. Then I'm holding on to it here. Then I want to just attach this by wrapping it around just the once, because we already then need to get into the weave that we're going to be doing straight away. So it's attached now. Then I'm going to bring in another base wire, just grab one more, and then place it right above the other one, on top of the weaving wire there. So just like that, and then I'm going to take my weaving wire over the top of both of them, and then back down behind them both again. But then I'm going to come up between the 2 that we just went across the top of, and then use that to help push it down, to make the weave nice and tight. And then bring in the next base wire, same thing, just grab another one, bring it right above the others, so this is now the new top one. And then we take the weaving wire here over the top of the top 2, the new top 2 ones, bring it back down behind all of them, only to come up between the 2 that we just wrapped across the top of. And push that down, and then now basically we need to keep repeating this. So this is going to also be the main weave that we're using. So it's a diagonal wire weave, so it gives this kind of diagonal effect to it. Grab another base wire, place it above the others, and then just like the other times, go over the top of the top 2 base wires there, come down behind and up between the 2 just wrapped across the top of. So just like this. So just keep doing this until you've added in all of the base wires. So now I added in all the base wires here. You can see they're all connected with this weave that we made along the way as well. So I have my weaving wire coming up between those two top ones. And just to finish this round off, what we need to do is just bring the weaving wire around the top one by itself. So obviously instead of adding in another one, we're just going over the top of the top one and then coming all the way down behind all of them again. So it runs across the back of all the base wires and then it's coming out towards the bottom there. And that just finishes off that round. So like I just said, that's basically a full round of the weave here. What I also just like to do, because this weave can have a bit of a tendency to kind of want to go a little bit at an angle, I like to just take my chain nose or flat nose and just straighten it out so it comes straight across the wires from one side to the other one. Just gently like this. Then it's going to lay in nicely as well as we continue, because now what we need to do is continue with this weave, but obviously we've already got the base wires in there, so we don't need to add them in anymore. So we just have the weaving wire coming down on the bottom. So I'm going to go around the bottom base wire by itself first, just how we started out as well when we attached the wire, but now it's already attached, so we don't need to worry about that bit. Around that bottom one, back underneath here to come over the top of them, but go over the top of the bottom two, and then push that down, and then come up between the two that we just wrapped across the top of, and then use that to push that down as well so the weave becomes nice and tight, and then go over the top of the next two. So obviously the bottom one now is out of the question, so it's the next two up, these two here that would then go across the top of, so come down between those wires there, push it down and come up between the two that we just wrapped across the top of. So you can see we're basically repeating the exact same steps as the first row there, the first round, but obviously the base wires are already there. So all you got to do now is continue like this, going across the top of two base wires until you reach the top, and remember to finish off that round just to do the top single wire by itself as the last one. And then you come down behind and start again. So what we want to do is make a few rounds like this so we have a short little length of our base wires here with weave on it before we start the rest of it. So now I made a few rounds here, and in total what I've actually made is 7, but you can really make this however long a piece that you want to. That's up to you and how you want it to look. And also remember, what you can do throughout to help keep this weave nice and tight is use your pliers here to help squeeze it together, because you kind of have a tendency to kind of want to separate a little bit. So just squeeze it together and then it'll stay in place. So now what we need to do is continue weaving, but only around certain wires. So first of all, I want to separate my wires out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the top 3 wires, so these 3 here, and I'm going to kind of just bring them out to the side a little bit. So just push them a bit out of the way. And then we also need to kind of do that with the bottom 3. So we're going to now just focus on these 6 wires in the middle, but only a few at a time, because what we're going to do is make basically 3 strands, end up with that. So I'm going to be working with these in pairs. So we're actually going to have, out of those middle 6, just separate these out a little bit more, the bottom 2 of those middle 6 there is going to be a pair, the middle 2 is a pair, and then the top 2 is a pair as well. So we need to continue weaving, and what I'm going to do is actually start weaving around that top pair, and I'm just going to continue using this weaving wire that's still attached. So I'm just going to bring it down behind, just as if we're going to continue weaving this piece, but obviously we now just need to swap around. I'm going to weave around these 2 here. So obviously there's quite a lot of base wires going on, but just kind of take your time and separate them out. So I need to then, it's the same weave that we're going to be doing as well, so there's no difference in that, but I'm going to bring my weaving wire up so it comes up below those 2 wires that I want to now wrap around, and then push it all the way down, and then otherwise make the same weave, like I said, around these 2 only. So just around the bottom one by itself first of all, push that down, then bring it up in the same place. Now over the top of both of them, push that down, up between the 2 base wires, and then use that to again push that down so it becomes nice and tight, and then just around that top one by itself, and then push that down as well. And again, you can always use some pliers to help squeeze it down, especially right here in the beginning, because obviously there's quite a lot of wires, base wires especially, going on, so we're a little bit limited for space. And then basically that's starting out the weave that we're going to make around this pair of base wires. So all you do now is continue this, go around the bottom one again. So you can see it's the same weave, we just have less base wires to work with. And then this is going to turn into one strand in the middle braid, and obviously the other pairs below there are going to be two other strands. So we're weaving these first of all. Just do this top one by itself as well. You can start to kind of see it grow a little bit out from this large weave that we've already done. Make it nice and tight, so you can see they're starting to grow out, and that's what we're going to keep doing now until we have the length that we need. And then once you've done that, you can then obviously cut off the end, the excess of the weaving wire, but I always prefer to leave a decent tail on it just in case we need to weave a bit more. But then you want to cut that off, and then you can just continue, pick up the tail. I'm just going to show you here, because then we need to wrap the other two as well, so you want to just separate them out so you have enough space between there to actually get a weaving wire in there as well. So I'm just going to now take the two middle ones out of those 6 in the middle, and then otherwise really just do the exact same thing. So bring your weaving wire first around the bottom one by itself, push that all the way down, and obviously this weaving wire isn't attached, that's what we're doing now, but it's not coming from this large weaving area, but that's fine. This is going to kind of continue, and you won't really be able to tell. It's going to be quite seamless because it's the same weave that we're doing. So like this, and this is where we just got to make sure that we have enough separation between these pairs that we can get this weaving wire down to sit and look like it's just continuing that weave there. And also can really help to push the wraps down with your chain nose pliers, and then just finish that off with the top one by itself. Now once you've done a few rounds here and you keep pushing that down, it's going to stay in place much more. So obviously you want to then continue on this one as well, make that the same length as the top one, and then finally do the exact same thing that I just showed you. Attach a new weaving wire to the bottom pair of those 6 wires in the middle there, and also weave the same length on that. So we're going to have 3 separate weaved lengths of a wire right there in the middle. So I've now weaved all the sections there in the middle, and you can see it kind of just looks like they're just continuing from this larger weave that we did in the first section there, and then all the way along looks like this. And I've done them to about the same length as well, so they're even. But I have left a tail on each of them of the weaving wire that I used, of about 20 centimeters. So you can see I have that on all of them, just so we have that to make any adjustments, because as we're going to use these to braid, they might end up not finishing quite evenly. So we can use these tails either if we need to undo any weave, or if we need to make a little bit more, we have these tails available. But then we need to start braiding these weave lengths together here. So I'm going to go back down to the beginning where the weave lengths start. And we just need to basically use these 3 lengths that we've just weaved and make a 3-strand braid. So obviously it's a pretty basic technique, but because we're using wire, it's going to be a little bit different. Because my personal preference is to try and get the braid as tight as possible. So to do that, we need to work with it a little bit differently. Obviously it's down to you what you prefer. If you prefer like a bit more of an open braid, you can easily kind of just do it as you would do a normal braid with cord or hair or something. But to try and get it tight, regular technique to make the braid, I'm going to bring one from the side over with the middle one, and then that becomes a new middle one. Doesn't matter what side you start from. Before I do that, the middle one there, that the side one needs to go over, I'm going to push that down a bit. So if you look from the side, you can see it kind of comes down away from the others. Before I then, and just bring it slightly out to the side, I'm going to take the bottom one here first over. Like I said, it doesn't matter which one. So slightly starting to come underneath that bottom one, and then the bottom one here I'm going to lift up a bit and then bring over and in to the middle And then we can bring the bottom one further out here, which is now the new bottom one. That was the middle one. Something like that. And then we need to take the top one over this new middle one here. So to do that, before I bring it over, I'm going to then push down this middle one. So I push that down against the other one here. It's now going over and then coming downwards. Again, you can see from the side, I'm pushing it down like that. To then bring the top one, lift it up a little bit to then bring it over and in to become the new middle one. And you can always bring the other one here further out a little bit if you need to. Just the other single wires here to the side, so 3 we have on either side, just keep them out of the way. You can just, if you need to, try and push them a little bit out to the side. So we're just focusing on these 3 weave lengths in the middle. So something like that. And then this middle one here, before moving anything else, I push that down as well. And then bring the bottom one, that's the next one I need to bring it over and into the middle, lift it up, and then over this bottom one to then come into the middle and be the new middle one. Now also throughout, make sure that these weave lengths are laying flat. So obviously we have 2 base wires running through the weave, so make sure the actual wires aren't going to be twisting around. We want to make sure that they lay nice and flat next to each other. Push that down, and then the next one here. Gently bring it around and then over and into the middle. And we can start to see the actual structure of the braid there forming. And just make sure as you go that you have the tightness in the braid that you want to before you move on. Because if it's not quite tight enough, you can always just undo the last little stuff that we did and then kind of redo it. Rather do that while you're here, because otherwise you can't really fix that later on. So just like that, and you basically just continue like this until you get to the end and you have your length of braid there in the middle. So now finish braiding the lengths here until I run out of length of the weave to use. So what we need to do now is make sure that they line up with each other. So you can see the top 2 there are kind of lining up nicely, so that's coincidence. But then the bottom one here you can see is slightly shorter, so I need to make sure that that lines up with the rest as well in a straight line down. So you just pick up that weaving wire and then you start the exact same weave again, so we just continue, make another round of the weave, and then that just extends it slightly. So you just do the amount of rounds that you need to make them even with each other. And obviously they might align differently. You might have a top one or a bottom one that's shorter. Just make sure they all align with each other regardless how that works out. And also what I just want to mention is, obviously, if you need a different size bracelet, then you want to make these lengths of the weave when we're initially weaving them either shorter or longer. So if you want a smaller bracelet, you can make the lengths shorter, because obviously we need shorter lengths here to braid with. Or you can make them longer if you need a larger bracelet. But otherwise just align them on the end regardless how long you need this braid to be. So it looks like that there. So now we have this main middle braid in place. Now what we need to do is, I'm just going to leave this for now because we can't finish off this end until I've brought the other wires back up as well, because obviously down here you can see they're all fitting together nicely. So we need to now use these individual wires on either side. So we then go all the way back to the beginning here, and I'm just going to be working on one side at a time, so it doesn't matter what side you start with. And then I'm just holding it however I feel comfortable to make this braid now. So again, this is going to be a basic 3-strand braid with these, I'm starting on my right side, separate lengths of the wire. So first of all, I just want to start it before I add in any beads. So I like to start from the outside one and bring that in first. But again, same principle as before, I just want to push that middle one down a bit. So you can see, push it down from the others. And then I bring the outer one over that and into the middle, because I like to just get the braid going then before we add the beads in, so we kind of get a little bit of a rhythm in place. Now that's the new middle one, because obviously we also have the other braid here that can be a little bit in the way as we're working with it. Bring it a little bit over to the other side there, and then that's the new middle one. We now need to bring the other outer one, but that's towards the middle of the bracelet, so right next to the other braid there. over that one and into the middle, and again we can just push that down a bit first and then bring that over. Now what's also going to help is when we add the beads in, they're going to also just help with the spacing in the braid. And that's what I actually want to do now. So what I'm going to do is grab one of my beads, and then I want to add that to my outer wire here before I bring that over and into the middle as the next movement. Just go right to the end, add it on and let it drop all the way down there, and you can see it's going to slot in there in that little corner. But otherwise it's the same principle. I want to push down the middle wire a bit first, and then make sure that bead is pushed all the way up and kind of gets stuck in that little corner, and then bring this wire over the next one and into the middle. So that's a new middle one. And you can see obviously that bead now helps with the spacing because these wires can't now be any closer than what they naturally are because the bead is in the way of making it tighter. So you can obviously also really play around with what beads you want to add in. But that should also help make the braid throughout nice and consistent. But in this middle one, just push it down a bit to then bring the left one here over that and into the middle. So that's the new middle one. So I'm kind of just bringing this when I'm bringing it into the middle from the other side, and then just slightly underneath the braid here, just while we're working with it. Now again, the next one I need to bring in is the outer one, so the right one over and into the middle. Before I do it, I add in my bead. So I want to add that every single time we bring the outer one on the one side here, over and into the middle. So make sure that bead is pushed all the way up, sits in the corner, and then bring the wire over and into the middle. And then just straighten that back up. Smooth anything out as you're working with it. Now the other wire here, and now just bringing it over the middle braid there. And then I push the current middle one down a bit to then bring this over and into the middle. So the new middle one. And then we basically just continue now. You now add a bead again to the outer one, and you can start to see we're going to form this braid all the way along with beads along the outside edge and really just add that nice embellishment. Now of course continue with that until you reach the same length as the braid in the middle there, so it's going to align nicely with the ends of the weed sections. And then once you've done that side, you simply want to just move over to the other side here and repeat the exact same thing, except obviously we're working in reverse, so mirrored. So I'm going to be adding the beads to, in this case here, the left side. So both sides, the beads are on the outer edges. So now I've finished off those two braids as well and added in all the beads there. Then what we just want to make sure of is that all the lengths, whether it's the braids on the side or that braid in the middle, that they end evenly. So we basically have more or less a straight line going across there. Also, pretty much just how they start out, because now what we want to do is finish this off. So what I'm just doing as well is the rest of the weaving wires here from that middle part, I'm just tucking them behind to get them out of the way. I'm going to finish them off towards the end as I'm going to finish off all the rest of my weaving wires. So just leave them out of the way. Then I'm going to grab a new length of weaving wire here, and we need to start weaving this section, which is the section that we started out with. So this diagonal wire weave across all of the lengths there. And we also basically need to reattach them all together so it becomes one piece. So I'm just going to take towards the end of the weaving wire, put it behind, so I have something to hold on to here. Then what we need to do is just start the exact same weave. So just make sure all the lengths here going out to the end and the lane next to each other, as close to each other as possible, so they're basically ready and in position to start this weave now. So I'm going to go around the bottom one first of all. This attaches the wire, and as you can see the weave is going to start just below where the ends of those weaves in the middle there. So it's going to go straight across, go over the top of two, and the first few wraps can be a bit fiddly because obviously these base wires are actually kind of open because it's the braids on the side. But just use chain nose pliers if you need to, help squeeze things together. The main objective in this first round is basically to get them reattached and also get the base wires back as close to each other as possible. So just like this over the next two, You can see the exact same weave, working my way now up to the one of those sections in the middle where we need to make it look like we just continue the weave there up between them. Then all you do is bring them as close together as you can and then go across the top of the next two. So like that, which then attaches these two, this bottom braid, and then attaches that to that middle section. So like that, go over the top of the next two. And now it's a matter of, we can use those sections in the middle to basically see where the weave we're doing now is going to be, because we want it to be right after those sections there. But then go on to the next section in the middle, which then attaches them two together. Push everything as close as you can and push it down tight so they sit next to each other, the rounds of your weave. So it looks like it's all just continuing in one piece. You just keep going like this until you've brought all the wires back in, all the base wires back in like this, and then go back down behind all of them to start up the weave again, a new round. And what you want to then do is do the same amount of rounds as we have there in the beginning. So now that I've finished this end here, then what I want to do before we actually finish the ends of the base wires is get rid of all the excess weaving wires. So I'm just flipping it around to the back here, and then I'm just going to show you on one because it's going to be the same on all of them. So this is just the length that I was just working with. Now towards the back, I've already wrapped it around that final base wire a single time, according to the weave anyway. So make sure you at least wrap around a single base wire by itself. Then I'm going to take my flush cutters, and as it's continuing to wrap around here, I'm going to cut off the excess towards the back, but just so there's a short little tail left. Get rid of the excess wire. So you can see there's going to be a short little tail sticking out there. You can also feel it, so I need to tuck that away. So I take my chain nose pliers and then just squeeze it down, and then I like to roll my pliers in the direction that the wire is wrapping around. So basically it makes it tuck in between the two base wires and really gets rid of it. And what you just want to do is take one wire at a time, the rest of them here, and go through and do exactly the same thing all the way down to the very beginning as well. So now to finish off the ends here, because that's all that's left to do is get rid of the excess base wire, but also obviously make some kind of loops we can attach our findings to. So I'm going to do the same on both ends. So I'm just going to flip it around to the back. Then we have all the lengths of base wire coming out from that section of weave there. So what I'm going to do is take one from either side. I'm going to take the very outer left one first, bring it over all the others towards the right, so kind of just bend it down like this, straight across, right at the end of the weave. And then I'm going to take the right one and bend it to the opposite side as well, straight across like this, kind of just then laying behind the other one. So there we go. Then I take my chain nose, because then the front one here, the one coming from the left but going towards the right, I'm then gonna place my chain nose roughly in the middle there. So when I bend this upwards like that, the bend is in the middle, just like that there. Then I'm going to use the other length to wrap around it. So it's coming from behind, so basically I just want to keep wrapping here around like this. You can just bring it back out a little bit, and then around the back to make it secure. You can always use chain nose pliers to help push it together. We want this wrap to be as far down as it's possible, really, to where that bend is. So just wrap a few times. Just going to bring it around one more time. Make sure your wraps are as nice and tight as possible next to each other. So if you need to, because obviously it's a little bit of small space to work with, use your chain nose pliers to help push them together. So just like this. So that now secures these two wires nicely in place. Then what I'm going to do is get rid of the excess. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers here, sorry, my flush cutters, cut off the excess. Can't really cut with chain nose pliers. Cut that off there, and then make sure you squeeze down that very end. So we don't have a little end of the wire there sticking out that we can feel with our skin in any way. So there we go. Now this length that's sticking straight up that we wrapped around, that's going to be the one we're going to use to make a loop with. But obviously we still have the other ones here, kind of just sticking straight out. So what I'm going to do is separate them into half and just kind of separate them from each other. So what I need is 5 lengths on the one side and the other 5 on the other side. So basically split them so we have that one still in the middle, because then we need to bring the 5 on the right here, I'm just going to start with them, down, they're coming from the front, down towards the back here, but on this side of that middle wire, just bring them all together, bending them over the wires that are coming straight across there, as far down as they'll go, something like that. And then the same with the other ones, also bring them on the other side of that wrap in the middle, and then push them down nice and flat, as flat as you can with your fingers. If you do need to adjust any other wires individually, you can always pull on 1 or 2 individually if they kind of stick up a little bit more than the other ones. So something like that there. It's going to look a little bit something like this from the front. If you need to just bring them up a little bit, these ones here, just adjust them while we can. So then I take my flush cutters again, because we now need to cut off the excess. So I want to put my cutters just below where they're coming around, so kind of wrapping around there. So we're going to have a little end left on the back here, but not too long, because we need to be able to tuck it away so it's not sticking out anywhere or in the way. I'm just going to go across, do all of them. You do one at a time, or a couple at a time. Get these away. And then I'm just going to cut off the other side as well. And I like to kind of use the first side here as a guide to where I cut on the other side. So I put my pliers up against the ends, and then I just cut off the excess on the other side. Just like that. And now what there's left to do is take my chain nose or flat nose, and we need to squeeze these down, because right now they're sticking out quite a bit, as you can see. So we actually just need to squeeze these down. If you can do all of them at the same time, try and do that. Otherwise you can also go in from the top, so you have one side of your pliers there on the front, and kind of help squeeze them down like that, one at a time. Just to really make sure you get the ends kind of pointing in towards your work that you've already done there, which then tucks them away. Make sure they don't slip too far on the side. On the other side, do the same thing. Get right on the end of them, and then squeeze them down. Which then, as you can see there, just tucks the ends back in towards the piece and gets rid of them. So then for the final wire that we need to make the wrapped loop with, I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers to put a bend into it. So I just put it to the side here and place my pliers just a few millimeters above the previous wrap. So we have a bit of bare wire showing there. Then I put a bend into it. Then I take my, in this case, 6-step bell making pliers. You can also use round nose pliers. I just like using these because they give the perfect size, and I know I'll get the same size on both ends as well. Use that to then bring the tail of the base wire all the way around the pliers to get a full circle. Something like that. Then I take my chain nose again, place it on the circle so it holds its shape, and then I just wrap the tail here around the little space of bare base wire that we left to basically fill in the gap between the loop, the circle that we just made, and the previous wrap just below it. Make sure your wraps are as tight as possible. You need to squeeze them together here, because again, just working with a short length, it's just really so we're able to make this wrap. So wrap until you feel like you haven't got any more space. Then take your flush cutters, cut off the excess, and then also just make sure to squeeze this end in so that doesn't stick out and scratch on your skin. So there we go. So we now have a loop on the end where we can then attach our clasp to that. So do this on both ends. Finish off both ends like this here, so we have those two loops. We can attach our findings, and then all that's left to do is shape the bracelet. So now I've finished off both of the ends here, and I've attached my clasp and extender chain as well. So like I said, all that's left to do is shape this. So you can either shape this around something that has the size and shape you want it to have. So either a bracelet mandrel or a mug if you have that at home or anything. Just something so you can really get the rough shape in there. But you can also use your hands and fingers, so that's what I'm going to do. And you just want to start in a place. Don't go in and make a big bend because that'll make it out of shape. But start gradually, basically, putting a curve into the piece. Obviously making sure the front of the bracelet is facing outward here, because the back is where we have the long lengths of weaving wire going across, and also that's where we finished off the base wires there. But then you just go back and forth, gradually putting a curve into it there. You can see we're slowly getting a shape. Back and forth like this until the two ends end up meeting each other. And obviously we can then use the clasp. So now that I've finished shaping it, this is what the bracelet looks like. So you can see we have this really lovely effect of the three individual braids that look like they're separate, and also the different kinds. So obviously that chunkier one and more textured one in the middle, and then the more simple ones but with beads on the outer edges to kind of just cage it in nicely. And also those beads add a lovely pop of colour. But then the ends are finished off like this here, and obviously even though they are three separate braids, it's all still one piece, so it sits nice and securely on your wrist. You don't have to worry about you wearing different pieces, it's all one complete piece here. And obviously you can choose whatever kind of clasp that you want to use for yours. I'm just using this Lotto Claw clasp and extender chain, that's completely personal preference. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial here. So feel free to check out my channel, I have loads of other tutorials, and also for wire braiding, I really do enjoy making that. So you can check that out. I'm going to have a playlist with all of it, so feel free to check that out in the description box below as well. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.